as a psychologist, money and sex. If somebody makes an appointment with me to talk about something that's troubling them, it's usually going to be like money or sex, or money and sex. So, all right, money. Money is so confounding, and it just doesn't have to be. And I think part of one of the things that I think that happens is that our human experience is confounding, and it's a mystery, and that's a bad setup, right? If I'm confounded, that hurts. If it's a mystery, well, that doesn't help the confounded hurtness piece of it, because then in order for me to relieve this pain that I'm in of being human and being here in this experience, I have to surrender to the mystery. Well, I don't like that. I want to know. I want an answer. I want it to be clear, which it just never is. So whenever I want to get a deeper sense of understanding something that's mysterious, I go to the archetype. I go back to the beginning. I tell myself the story of the thing itself from the very beginning. And then what I get from that is a deeper understanding that defies rationale. It goes beyond my mental need to sort of put it into some sort of a place, and I get a more mysterious appreciation of the thing. Okay, so money. Let's start with just us here as consciousness. So it somehow began a very, 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 very long time ago with just a lot of stuff that was like gas and explosions and stuff like that, and began to coalesce and coalesce and coalesce and coalesce and coalesce, and suddenly it began to come together, and somewhere in that coming together sparked this great combustion that became the center of this thing, this being that eventually coalesced and coalesced and coalesced. It became the sun, and then it had a lot of stuff floating around it, and that started to spin around and spin around and spin around, and that stuff came together, and that became planets. And then somewhere about 2 million years ago, something sort of sprang forth in this coalescing that was the ultimate expression of the consciousness, and it became a sort of moving form that we are going to call life, that we are a part of. We're that old. We tend to think of ourselves as we came here when we started to build things. But we really came here way, 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 way before that. And where we are today is connected to that idea of just consciousness coming together. Not unlike what happens in the womb when you've got a little egg and then you get a little sperm in there and they come together and there's this little explosion. See, now there's no difference between that explosion and the explosion that happened a bunch of billion years ago that sort of resulted in us. And scientists tell us this has got something to do with elements, and the elements came from stars, and it's just too confusing, and we only have 20 minutes. So this stuff started to get wet, and then in the wetness, it became a little more formed, and then some of us sort of stepped up out of the wetness, and then, then there was probably a big explosion or something, and then everything that was reptilian mostly died off, and then the mammals came in. Okay, here we are. Versions of human beings, roughly 2 million years ago. One of them took, and that's us. And somewhere about 1 million or so years ago, we began to kill animals and eat meat. This is important, so sorry for you vegans and vegetarians. When we began to eat meat and consume protein, our brains began to grow and expand. And in that, we became, I think the most important piece of that isn't that we got smarter, because frankly, I don't think we got that much smarter. But we did recognize something. Somewhere along the line, we recognized the idea of cooperation. So now here begins the archetype building, right? So the masculine principle says, I hunt, I eat. I do. The feminine principle says, let's do it together, because it'll be easier, better. And the masculine principle says, oh, well, whatever, okay. So we began to gather in sort of community, and we started doing this together. We started sharing the burden. You know, this, by the way, is where the sex piece comes into it, because the masculine principle says, oh, that sex thing, I like it. I want to do it. And the feminine principle says, okay, build a fire. And you can have all this if you build a fire. It's like, I don't want to build a fire, but I want some of that, so whatever. If I have to work a little bit. Okay. So in this spirit of cooperation, we began to discover more than just cooperating with each other. If we cooperated with the earth, we could do something magnificent, which was we could cultivate plants and make more. And this is the beginning of it all. When we started to plant, and certain pieces of geography on this planet were better than others for this, but where it was good, which is sort of right in the center of things in Africa and the Middle East, we began to plant and store. Now, this is really, really crucial because, by the way, this is where money got born. Way before it was minted and printed, it was just, oh, if I work in cooperation and I balance between the masculine principle of doing and the feminine principle of being, I can get more. More and more and more. I put this stuff aside, which is, again, another feminine principle that says, yeah, I think we ought to prepare for the rhythm and flow of things because, not every year does it work as well as it did the last year with the rain and the sun and la, 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 la. Okay, more. So where this becomes as important is in the creation of civilization. It is that more that allowed us to advance. Why? Because not everybody wanted to hunt. I didn't have to hunt now suddenly because why? There was plenty and more saved over there. I don't want to hunt. I want to stay home. I don't want to play with the rocks. Oh, well, look what I made, a better tool. Ooh, that's good. Now I can hunt better. Well, you can hunt better. I'm not hunting. I'm playing with rocks. But the hunters can hunt better. The farmers and the gatherers can gather better because now they've got tools, okay? Some of those people who didn't want to hunt looked up or gather. I got to be fair to all the women who, there were some of the women who didn't want to gather. They said, I want to build, rocks and tools. It's equal opportunity. There was no, shame and judgment about who wanted to stay home and do the thing that was special and different. So some of us looked up. And said, oh, that's moving there, that's moving there, that's moving there. And suddenly we get mythologies, storytelling, Some of the people stayed back and said, that thing that we do when we're hanging around, we're having dinner, we're telling stories? I'm going to make an outfit, and it's going to be fabulous. And suddenly ceremony and ritual is born, okay? All because we've got this thing called more. So you see already there's just this natural exchange between the plenty and the receiving benefit of having the plenty. If we could live like that again, and I don't mean that we have to go back to hunting and gathering, I'm talking about the consciousness of, I do not have to worry about not hunting and not gathering if I am called to do this, that, or the other thing, because there's plenty and more. And if you think that scarcity has ever really been a problem on this planet, take a look around. You are here. You are here because it worked. If it didn't work, we would not be here. So there's another sort of misnomer, this idea about money. Money's not working. I don't have enough. That is not true. You are here. You have been fed. You have been kept safe because there has been plenty and more, and you have tapped into that plenty and more every moment of your life. We simply forget that. Now, many of us have a challenge to this prosperity consciousness because out there is terrible, terrible poverty. Now, my mind does not have an answer for you around that. My mind cannot wrap my head around the uneven distribution of wealth and why we can't seem to fix that. My heart actually knows exactly how to fix it. Unfortunately, they have to work together, the mind and the heart. Back to the masculine principle of the thinking and the heart principle of being have to come into congruency around this thing. And that's when everyone will be fed. Now, I can't solve the problems of Syria because I'm not in Syria, right? But if I want to create peace out there, I have to create peace in here. It's the same thing with poverty consciousness. I have to fix my wounded sensation that there is not enough in order for there to eventually be enough. So if you're focusing on the challenge of there not being enough and suffering because it hurts you that there's not enough, stop doing that. Because it's not helping. I mean, I don't want you to stop feeling about it, right? I'm not telling you not to have those feelings and those sensations about it, but put it down a little bit and pick up a little bit more the scarcity sensations that you're having about your own experience, and that will feed the hungry. Maybe not today. Maybe not today. But we're not really here to fix everything that we see out there as a challenge. We're really here to just heal our own hearts and watch the miracles happen out there. Okay? So, back to this idea of, well, how do we do that? I go to the archetypes again. Many of you know that I'm also an astrologer, so I kind of love using the movement of the planets to illustrate points. We live in this thing called a solar system, and our consciousness is, as beautifully and poetically described by your song, we are the marriage between the Mother, Father, God. We are that. We are not the sun. Frankly, we're not the earth either. We're the marriage between the sun and the earth. They cannot exist without each other. The earth would not exist without the rays of the sun shining upon it. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, the sun would exist if the earth weren't here to reflect back on it, and that's true. Except who would care? It's sort of an irrelevant relationship because the sun just relentlessly shines and shines. It just knows what to do. Life happens when it gets reflected back, and something happens in that middle ground of meeting of the Father God and the Mother God. They come together in this dynamic, fabulous tension. That's us. Now, that doesn't always feel good. But that idea is only because we have attributed the painful experiences as painful as opposed to just sensation. Life hurts, okay? I'm not trying to pretend that it doesn't. It hurts. It hurts the body physically. It hurts the body emotionally. But it's only in my naming it as a bad thing that I have suffering with it. So when we come into more balance with this, I assure you, it's not that suddenly we don't hurt anymore. We just stop calling it bad. We stop calling it pain. So this applies to how you feel the energy of the day or how you feel when you look at your checkbook. You know, if you pay attention to that bank balance as the arbiter of your emotional experience, you are in trouble. And I don't care if you have a little or a lot. This idea of judging your own sense of selfness by the up and the down applies whether you've got plenty and more or not so much plenty and more, whether hand to mouth or, hotel to private island. It's really all the same if you're focusing on that for your sense of groundedness and your sense of self. When that Father God of the sun and Mother God of the earth sort of meet in the middle and create life, it is an endless flow of life expressing. Anybody got a house plant? I love my house plant. I mean, to me, my house plant, and I now actually I've gotten very excited about this idea that I have now about 5 or 6. But I had to start with one, right? Because my idea, my mythology about myself was I kill them. And there wasn't really a mythology. It was fact. Oh, I just thought about this. My mother used to kill all her houseplants too. So I think that there was all right, but that's another talk. My houseplant is thriving. And I'm talking about one in particular because it's the one that was the first that I sort of call part of my spiritual practice, is this plant that I focus my consciousness on. And it's not just that loving, like, oh, I'm going to talk to my plant and have a sort of a hooey experience of yes, and therefore it grows and thrives. That's true. I love the plant, and my plant is responding to love. But my plant is also responding to the masculine principle of I remember to water it and feed it and open the blinds so that the sun will shine upon it. And so when I have a doubting moment, I can look at that plant and be reminded, oh, right, it never ends. It never ends if I am focused on the very simple things I need to attend to. And then up it comes. More life, more leaves, more flowers, more expression of endless abundance. So I had a big paradigm shift around this just this past summer. I went from the sort of 10-year period between when I finished my doctorate in psychology, and I had to do a dissertation, I had to write a book, I had to do all of this stuff that wasn't going to earn me income. I was going to try to qualify that statement. No, I just wasn't making any money from doing the things that needed and required my attention for me to attend to that which I was called to. And I live in an abundant universe, and I attracted everything I needed, including a beloved friend of 30 years who said, move in with me. I will take care of your financial needs, because that's how much I believe. He didn't actually put it this way, but that's sort of the spirit of it, because he believed in what I was doing. And that was a wonderful, wonderful blessing. And I recognized that as part of my divine consciousness, bringing the abundance that I needed in order to fulfill my destiny. Now, admittedly, I stayed about 2 years too long at the fair because I was a little scared. I was a little scared at that moment when it was like I had to get my big boy pants on and say, I can now make a living enough to pay for all my expenses. And I don't mind telling you, it wasn't like, oh, yes, I woke up one day and it was like, now I'm ready. And it wasn't a Hallmark movie. It was that moment where if I stayed any longer, one of us was going to be dead, and it was probably going to be him. And if that wasn't enough, I had to sort of say, oh, well, I'm going to go on retreat, and I moved up to Ojai. Some of you remember that, and I didn't pay any rent while I was up in Ojai. I lived on 23 acres in a beautiful ranch and a house of my own and a eucalyptus grove with owls and hawks' nests, and I was like, wow, this is great. And then there came a moment there, too, where I was like, the agreement that we had, my benefactor and myself, came to an end. And I was like, how long can I extend this? Because I'm liking this sensation. And that didn't stay that way. Let's just put it that way. That ended as well. And suddenly it came time to move back to Los Angeles and get an apartment and pay for my own internet and pay for my cable if I wanted to watch TV and pay for this, pay for that. It's like, okay, so my consciousness was, I know the laws of abundance. I trust them. Well, okay, let me say it this way. Absolutely, I trusted them, but I had limitations. I had limitations to my consciousness. It was easy to trust those principles when there was somebody supporting me, right? So when I got scared, I was like, oh, I'm scared. It's like, oh, well, don't pay your car payment this month. It's like, okay. Now I'm not scared. And I would teach this to people. I would teach these principles. I was like, oh, man. Okay. I'm confronted. And it wasn't that I didn't know what the principles were, and it wasn't like I didn't know how to do this work. I do know how to do this work. But I just hadn't gone that far yet because I hadn't needed to. And so there was a moment where it's like, oh my God, do I have the goods to get past this moment of fear? And here's where it happened. When, where, whatever. I was coming into my apartment, which, by the way, I love. I love my new home. And everybody who comes into it is like, wow, this is such a great place. because it is. It's my home, and it springs forth out of this, love of my life and what I do. It looks that way. Like, it looks that way. You walk into my house, and you're like, this is the home of somebody who loves his life. So I'm living there now about, 6 weeks, and I got my key in my hand, and I'm coming in the door, and I'm having this epiphany. Now, I think I just walked in the door, but in my mind of this moment is that time stopped. And I had this epiphany. It's like, oh, okay, I know that in the relationship between the mother-father, well, son's over here in my mind, Father, Mother, God, that it is the earth's good graces to bust forth and bud endless supplies of abundance. I know this in my cells, right? And if I call my home, my apartment, the thing I'm looking to be supported, I had this epiphany. It was like, oh my God, or I guess I should say, oh my goddess. It was the Mother Goddess's good benevolence who gave me the apartment. That consciousness is what propelled me out of the place where I was being supported and into the place where I was standing in my own vision. I thought I had done it. And then of course, if I had done it, I would be nervous. Is mommy going to help? What if mommy doesn't think I'm doing the right thing? Ugh, hubris, arrogance. It's always, well, for me, that's always where it always comes down to. But this idea that I created this, will life support it? So the issue wasn't like believing that life would support my vision. It was remembering that the vision itself isn't even mine. I think it is. Of course, you know why? Because if I think it's my vision and you go, oh, Michael, you're so fabulous, then I get to take credit for it. And that sort of feels good. But the truth is, it's not our vision. We are also here doing something much bigger than what it looks like we're doing. You think you're living your life and having your career and making your living and paying your bills and coming to services so that you can feel a little better and smiling at people you kind of like, and then everything feels better, and then you learn a little bit and you get a little bit more graceful about it all. But we're actually like lifting the whole planet up. That's what we're here for. I don't like to talk about that stuff so much because it's a little hooey. But I believe it. I believe that we're here doing mighty, energetic work, lifting all of humanity up, creating an end to war, feeding the whole planet. Do not look out there for evidence about whether or not we're succeeding. In fact, don't even look for whether we're succeeding at all. Just come back to center and remember that at the center we are a perfect, whole and complete embodiment of the Mother, Father, God, bursting forth and budding an endless supply of abundance. And so it is. Thank you.